Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Leah Madry, and I am the Executive Director of the Dairy Barn Arts Center. I'm so glad to have you all here on this lovely evening. The Dairy Barn is located in Athens, Ohio, and throughout the year we have a plethora of fantastic and world-renowned exhibitions. We also have a full calendar of adult and youth arts education programming. And additionally, we are a event venue and space for community events, for events like this one that are digital, for weddings and all kinds of things. So I want to welcome you all. I would also like to take a moment to introduce Carrie Gunter Seymour, who is our special host for this evening. And Ohio Poet Laureate Carrie Gunter Seymour focuses on lifting up underrepresented voices, including incarcerated adults and women in recovery. Her collection, Alone in the House of My Heart, was selected 2023 Best Book Award from American Book Fest and finalist for the National Indie Excellence Award. She is an artist in residence for the Writing the Land Project, a Pillars of Prosperity Fellow for the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio, and the founder and executive director of Women of Appalachia Project, and editor of its anthology series, Women Speak. Her work has been featured on Verse Daily, Poem of the Week, World Literature Today, the New York Times, and Poem a Day. You can find her at carriegunterseymourpoet.com. And thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Oh gosh, thank you, Leah. It is such a joy to do this program, and it wouldn't be the same without you. And I really do want to thank you, Leah, and all the fine folks behind the scenes of the Dairy Barn Arts Center for hosting us. And I also want to thank the Ohio Arts Council for sponsoring the 2024 season of Spoken and Heard events. So I'm beyond excited to be here with everyone this evening. I want to remind everybody that tonight's event will be available for replay on the Dairy Barns YouTube page, and I'll also post it on my personal Facebook and Twitter X page shortly after we say goodnight. So tonight's event is the last of the spring season and features two simply amazing women. I don't know how else to express it. Angela Jackson Brown and Sarah Henning. So let's just begin. Sarah Henning is the author of the poetry collection Burn from Southern Illinois University Press, which was the 2022 Crab Orchard Series in Poetry Editors Selection. Terra Incognita, Ohio University Press, the winner of the 2021 Hollis Summers Poetry Prize, and View from True North, winner of the 2017 Crab Orchard Series in Poetry Open Competition Award, and the 2019 High Plains Book Award. In 2015, Sarah was awarded the Crazy Horse Linda Hull Memorial Poetry Prize, and in 2019, the Poetry Society of America's George Bogan Memorial Award. She's a recipient of scholarships from the Sewanee Writers Conference and the Appalachian Writers Workshop. She is an assistant professor of English at Marshall University. And I first met Sarah when my own collection was accepted for publication by Ohio University Press, and so we became pressmates. And since then, we've participated in readings and a variety of events together. And she also lends her stunning voice and words to my Women of Appalachia project. She is a truly gifted, sincere poet, and I'm so very pleased to have her with us this evening. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you do running this series. I know that from being the A.E. Stringer series coordinator at Marshall University, that this sort of work is a labor of love. And it just thrills me tonight to be able to share words and share space with two dynamite writers, two poets that just knock my socks off. I mean, y'all are amazing, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to share some work from Burn, which just came out on Earth Day this past April. And Burn is a book about the moments that make us. And it's also about time. So when my mother died from colon cancer in 2016, a strange thing happened to me. Time stopped making sense. And hours bled into weeks that bled into months, because what I figured out later was grief really broke my internal compass. It robbed me of my true north. And so after all of this reading and grieving and thinking that I've done during that time, a poem by Delmar Schwartz helped me think about time and my relationship to it. And it's called Calmly We Walk Through This April's Day. And I'm just going to quote a small excerpt from it. What will become of you and me? This is the school in which we learn. Besides the photo and the memory, that time is the fire in which we burn. And that had so much resonance for me. That had such a profound way for me to conceptualize how time works within the human mind, within the way we organize humankind, and how we can enter into and emerge out of the difficult and joyous moments that allow us to be who we are. Time is a way in which we evolve and adapt and fall apart and learn to love again. Time is our real metric for resilience. And after my mother died and grief robbed me of my compass, all of these memories just rushed back. Moments from childhood, adolescence, my early years of marriage, and I wrote them down. Like the Velveteen Rabbit, my love made them real. So I'm just so excited to share some work from this book with you. The first poem that I'm going to share with you this evening is called Good Kissing, and it's after Jory Graham's poem, Two Paintings by Gustav Klimt. A little bit of information might be useful. For women in my family, every miracle began with a man. And I'm never going to say that that's right or that's good or that's proper, but rather it influenced the way that I thought about knowledge and the way knowledge awakens in us the realities of the world, a world that nurtures us, but often also betrays us. Good Kissing. The moon, the river bleeding out, its glamour and spume. I wanted to marry it all. Mosquitoes circling nests of eggs, dragonflies feasting from dusk-blurred water. Why did no one teach me that behind every miracle is a God taking everything it wants? I traced my finger over the picture book drawing of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, savor the stories of women. Proverbs, Eve, the apple luscious as her sin. Genesis, Lot's wife's a salt goddess, her body no Sodom, torched. Salome, Delilah, Potiphar's wife, Jezebel. But when Robert, my aunt's boyfriend, bomber jacket hugging his biceps, edged my aunt against the sink as she sliced tomatoes, kissed her with an open mouth. I'd never seen a man touch a woman like that. His throat flushed, her bleached Farrah Fawcett cut catching in his mouth. She gasped, laughed, begged him to stop. Because I believed he was killing her, I ran at him, fists raised. A humid afternoon in Georgia, 1989. Even now, I want to erase Robert's hands from her body, his touch proving I was stupid to love's hunger. Good kissing, my aunt said, is what a man and a woman do to make a baby. Weeks later, she's pregnant when they go to dinner, hostess seating them in their favorite booth. The wall's a montage of Elvis EPs, Love Me Tender, Viva Las Vegas. Photos of the king sealed under lacquer, the table scratched history. For women in my family, every miracle begins with a man, an origin story. When she told him, he threw down 20s, walked straight into the night. No longer body, but shadow of court hearings, custody payments. He was the whole her daughter would learn to call father. So I said earlier that my mother lost her battle with cancer just about 8 years ago now. And since then, she's really lived in my heart. And I want to share with you an epistolary poem that's a poem written in the form of a letter, which addresses our relationship and how love's range is so complicated and beautiful and infinite. This poem is a form called the abecedarian, which the first letter of a line follows the alphabet A, B, C, D. Letter in the shape of a banyan tree, with an epigraph by May Swenson. I always felt like a bird blown through the world. I never felt like a tree. A year before my birth, mother, you wished for a son to grow inside of you. You'd call him banyan tree, strangler fig, boy strong as my father. When I came, you knew a chickadee starving for love could carry no legacy. Call me daughter who names creatures of the night like firstborns. Daughter persuaded everything she loved could kill her. Possums hissing, their luminous, naked tails. For consolation, you dressed me in pink, tried to make me your perfect girl. But I was a tomboy, skin knees and tangled hair. Mornings you'd smoke while braiding me, smooth elastic, indigo girls on the radio. Around my body, the ghost of a son grew. Jealous, I butchered my Barbies with scissors, played Atari all afternoon. Donkey Kong, bronze a Frogger in my beanbag chair. Sunlight seethed within me, lasered our duplex windows. Love meant learning to run. Mother, where does it end, this story of us? Nightmares remind me you've been gone 8 years. Only now my prayers are bioluminescent, tractor beams luring your ghost planet back. But my memory keeps you breathing, quiet metronome for cicadas flexing their timbals in the yard. I still talk to you relentlessly, fevered questions about bodies, children, secret blood that won't stop. When will you answer? Aristotle said time is how we position ourselves relative to change. But I want to believe any universe flexes like Heteractis aurora, turquoise beaded sea anemone, space only valley of muscle, and we are the clownfish slipping through each other to another world. What is a day without darkness? When tumors clustered in your x-rays, mother, you became infinite. I am not your banyan, but I branch and sow. I'm a bird blown through the world. Call me daughter zeroed. I'll never let you go. This next piece I'd like to share with you is about my mother's Tiffany lamps that she used to collect from garage sales when we were growing up. We didn't have very much money, and they were so special to her, and she loved them so much. And so when she passed away, I inherited them. This is called A Brief History of Light. They will always be love letters, closed caption transcriptions unspooling across the TV. My mother, hard of hearing, watched her stories in silence. Guiding light, one life to live. Living room lit by 2 Tiffany lamps. Deep-throated wisterias, peonies etched against cream at the crown. All of it cast sleek flames at the ceiling. How many times did I stare into a lampshade, its luster blunted through coiled bronze wire and blown febrile, the canopy of glass in rich charade all night. Just like that, my knees are dirt smeared again. Braid down my back, I'm tilling mica from soil at recess, swearing it would catch fire in my hands. I imagined angels tunneling through layers of earth, catching their wings on oak roots, bricks, and those little wounds lodging there, waiting for me to dig them up with sticks. The way it sieved light through its scratched surface, nothing could compete. Not the goodies barrettes I'd spend whole hours unearthing while other girls lost themselves in games of freeze tag. Not their tortoiseshell glare. Queen of the hunt, I'd strut the cache with me wherever I'd go. So when she died, my mother, I grasped her lamps as if I were pulling slivers of dirt-rough mica from the earth, knowing their iridescence could burn any house down. So this next poem is also written in form. Several of the poems that comprise Burn are written in different forms, like the Sestina, the Abecedarian, what I'm about to share with you, which is Ars Poetica. And for those who don't know, Ars Poetica is a poem that explains the art of poetry. So the short version of the story is that my grandmother grew up during the Great Depression, and her mother, my great-grandmother, made a dish called slumgullion, and they lived in Chicago. My grandmother moved south when she married my grandfather, but it was basically goulash. I'm sure a lot of us have had it. Hamburger, tomato sauce, whatever you could buy, share or borrow. But remember, these were hard times. And so as long as my great-grandfather worked, he was a mechanic, so he oftentimes worked when other people did not. My great-grandmother would feed the neighborhood children whose parents were out of work. And that was just beautiful when my grandmother told that story to me. Unfortunately, my great-grandmother died of breast cancer very early. And my grandmother, like me, was young when she lost her mom. And I always had this vision that when my grandmother was making this dish called slumgullion, my great-grandmother would be there cooking with her. I wrote this poem after I had a breast cancer scare myself. It opens with an epigraph by Seamus Heaney. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. Ars Poetica after an abnormal mammogram. He couldn't save her, my great-grandmother, the surgeon blading breast from its hinge of ribs. Pectoralis major, rectus abdominis. So he stitched her, cauterized, sheared until only skin lashed her heart to the world. Radical mastectomy. Even cut, a woman saves what she can. Chicago, 1935. In her kitchen, biscuits bloomed from rationed lard, olives salted the soup. Even week-old beef in a pot of goulash was born again. As long as sweat from a day's labor streaked her husband's clothes, his pockets clinked with cash, she'd slip bowls to her neighbor's children out of the door. Winters, no one worked. She made sure no child starved. When it hardened in her breast like a walnut's husk, doctors could not cut it out of her, the tumor, or how she loved. Stubborn canna lily, language of her blood. When my gynecologist called 8 millimeters of asymmetry abnormal density, I believed the tissue in my breasts was unfurling into letters, decoding an origin song. When the technician angled me, x-rayed my flesh with a magician's precision, I became one of Duchamp's nudes, a glimpse of history, light's fractal, and later, an ultrasound sound waves translated the grammar of my breasts, transducer slick on my areola, gel the only interlocutor between my body and what speaks. I have no knife to follow women like her, my great-grandmother. I cut with words. I'll feed a city. All right, so this next piece that I'm going to read for you is also written in form. It's a sestina. A sestina is a poem that is comprised of six-line stanzas with a 3-line envoy. And the cool thing about a sestina is that you repeat the same 6 words at the end of the lines in a different order. And so you're going to hear the words express, orange, fork, pleasure, salt, and night over and over and over again. And the point, of course, of the form is not to bore anybody with that repetition, but to allow that repetition to make its own world. This poem was written during a time my husband and I were not doing very well. And during that time, all I wanted to do was call my mother, and I couldn't because she was already gone. This is called Meditation at Panda Express. My rendezvous begins at Panda Express, slinking between slivers of cabbage. Orange chicken's opulent flame bewitching my fork. Crab Rangoon is a star-shaped pleasure boat, princely lady killer of salt. I'll slide through cheap red oyster pails, night wishes for dim sum, this sorry effigy. I've learned to love nights in parking lots. Panda Express, its marquee at the drive-through exalting the stars. I want this bear-shaped oracle to shepherd me, to ease the grief I now mistake for hunger. I focus on freeing my fork from its plastic, hold it up to the light. On nights like this, the sky is shattered blue. Please, my prayer to no one. X's, O's, X's. Saturdays, husband, we used to split an orange Julius, suck until we could taste each other's salt. We'd summer in beachside condos, sip salt-rimmed margaritas. Now, I fake joy when you won't look at me. Aren't you glad I didn't say banana? I joke. Nights, you know better than a ghost. I think I'll pick up Panda Express, I say. You nod. These days, I learn to please myself. My headlights rapture shadows. Please, I say, searching for my face in the salt-kissed streets. It is winter. I want my mother, her yes to everything. Drive-through, cruising, forking through lines. Our night drives, she'd call them. Dying, I'd feed her orange slices between hits of morphine. Orange rind, orange Julius, orange you glad I didn't say, please don't go. Now I do the leaving. Night is only darkness reimagined, salt where longing existed, scar-shaped fork. My rendezvous begins at Panda Express. Orange chicken, a better man's swagger of salt. I begin with please, ask for an extra fork. Tonight at Panda Express, I'll eat my heart. I've got two more poems for you. So as much as Burn, the poems that I shared with you, the rest of the poems that I hope that you'll read one day, is about time. It's also a book about faith and how we're saved by love. In 2021, my dermatologist discovered a nevus spilis on my back. It's a mole, and it's also a risk factor for skin cancer. I want to tell you a story about biopsy, the fear of waiting out uncertain results. And while I'm happy to say it's benign, I wanted to share with you that as I waited, praying, I often fantasized that I was lying cradled in the hands of a God who would never abandon me. This poem has an epigraph by Longfellow. In the infinite meadows of heaven blossom the lovely stars, the forget-me-nots of the angels. A brief history of skin. Return it the moles constellating my right shoulder, deep brown poultice. My husband once kissed his way into its world. Bless it, biopsy knife swiping through my flesh, my faith, unname it, nevus spilis, little Andromeda galaxy stretching my skin, its infinite halo of dark matter. Unwhisper the word melanoma. Those sleepless weeks I swore it glimmered, debris from an exploded star. Unclench my hand from its jigger of vodka. Uncurl my husband's touch from my shoulder. Unwhisper the words cancer, mother. Unburden my skin from the blazing Utah May, where one spring the sun ravaged me. Untangle me from recklessness. Untrust the tumors from my mother's blood. Return her record player's needle shirring through scarred vinyl. Mick Jagger throating blues through her house on Victory Drive. Rebridle her hair to its messy knot. Unveil the dime-sized mole on the back of her neck. Give them back my father's words for it. Forget me not of the angels. Plush field of stars. Give her back her body when she still loved my father, when I still moved within her. But if you can give me nothing, God, return her name for me. Little one, infinite meadow of heaven. This is my last poem for you. I'd like to end the reading with a poem that celebrates how our bodies and souls carry us through the world. It's also the poem that I named the book after. Thank you so much for listening. This poem is called Burn. If middle age has a shape, it would be the body singing word by luscious word. My body's glory caught in my lungs. If I could, I would uncry myself, send my body back to my mother's womb where my father once signed his name in blood. I hung there, seam of cells fixed to my holy order, love's microscopic blaze so much like breathing. My heart still twined to my mother's. Her body, it held me like she hadn't given up. I longed to be pulled from my mother some August long ago and lie on her chest, naked, cord uncut, hair matted to my skull. I want to fill again the hollow in my mother death will not take as its house. Teach me, body, to unscar what is scarred, to cherish the uncharitable, my breasts whip philosophers, my eyes a murder of crows, my thighs are engines, leave traces of fire as I rise up. Watch me rise up. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, Sarah. Thank you so much for all those beautiful words and your wonderful voice. I did put links to all of Sarah's books in the chat, but for those of you who are going to be joining us later in the stream, Burn can be found at Southern Illinois University Press, Terra Incognita at Ohio University Press, and View from True North, Southern Illinois University Press, and of course, any online reputable bookstore as well. So come on, load up on those books. Our publishers need our support during this time. So moving forward, Angela Jackson Brown is an award-winning writer, poet, and playwright who is an associate professor in the creative writing program at Indiana University in Bloomington. She also teaches in the graduate program at the Naslund Mann Graduate School of Writing at Spalding University in Louisville, Kentucky. She has published her short fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry in journals like the Louisville Journal and the Appalachian Review. She is the author of Drinking from a Bitter Cup, House Repairs, When Stars Rain Down, and the Light Always Breaks. Her novels have received starred reviews from the Library Journal and glowing reviews from Alabama Public Library, BuzzFeed, Parade Magazine, and Women's Weekly, to name just a few. When Stars Rain Down was named a finalist for the 2021 David J. Langham Senior Prize in American Historical Fiction, was longlisted for the Granum Foundation Award, and shortlisted for the 2022 Indiana Authors Award. In October of 2023, Angela's current novel, Homeward, a follow-up to When Stars Rain Down, was published by Harper Muse. I have admired Angela's work from afar for quite some time, and finally had the privilege of meeting her in person this past spring at the wonderful Appalachian Studies Association conference that was held in Callaway, North Carolina. Angela is a powerhouse of words and offers up a unique and glorious voice that I could listen to for hours. Welcome to Spoken and Heard, Angela.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. First, let me just say thank you to our amazing host, Carrie. The vision that you have for this virtual reading series is unmatched. I have so enjoyed following your career and following this series. So thank you for including me and allowing me to be a part of it. Thank you to the Dairy Barn Arts Center and the Ohio Arts Council for supporting this event. And Sarah, my goodness, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your love of the written word. I could listen to you read all night. I'd like to share with you some of my poetry and prose. I will begin with poems from a collection that I'm working on that's tentatively entitled The Impossible Dance. This first poem is called Butterfly Wings. No one sang me lullabies. Cradled in a splintered crib, I was lulled to sleep by the sound of my own silent cries. My lips were sewn shut, stitched in awkward zigzags. I had ripped those stitches wide, my mouth becoming a perfectly shaped O. Butterflies tried to flutter from my mouth, even though their flesh still tasted of caterpillar. I tried to vomit them out, but they were one with my tongue. Maybe that is why they had time for a metamorphosis. Too bad I missed mine. There I was, a baby, with little to no chance of gaining my butterfly wings too. This next poem is called The Answer is C. I was a child once. I know this because I glimpse her every now and then. I can vaguely make out the imprint of her naked, bleeding feet. Her basket is empty now. He strewed her cherries everywhere. Why didn't you come searching for her, Daddy? Ollie, ollie, oxen free, you can't find me. Why do little girls' skin kneecaps taste like rotting flesh? Why did you neglect to see the muddy footprints on the linoleum? Why was your vision blurred like a modern day cyclops? Why did you always have more answers, more questions than answers, more answers than questions? Surely if you had been curious enough to ask her, she would have answered you. As time goes by, she has come to realize that the answer is always C. C, she opened closed doors because he told her to. C, she slow danced with crazy even at a young age. C, she knew you were there even though you couldn't see her pain. C, she was telling the truth times 2 minus the 1. C, 1 plus 1 is always he. C, she will vacuum pack her truth and store it in unmarked boxes. C, you went away and left her to unpack those boxes alone. C, she's much older now, but still wildly chasing apologies from corpses, long gone, long decayed. The next two poems are based on a mermaid legend in southeastern Nigeria. And these mermaids are called Mami Wata, and their main goal is to go and retrieve lost souls in the sea. Another character in this poem is Oludumare, and Oludumare is the supreme god who powers the Orishas. This first poem is called The Mami Wata Taste Revenge. The Mami Wata glistened, moonlit kissed, mahogany skinned finned creatures born out of Oludumare's tears. They stole them, he cries. Bring them back to me. The Mami Wata hear Oludumare and they swim into the deep, causing the waves to crash against the water beast, carrying away the children Oludumare calls his own. The winds rip the beast open and the sea swallows the spirits of the stolen. The Mami Wata slam their whole bodies against what is left of the gutted ship, causing the ghosts to fall into the raging waters. No one collects their souls. The Mami Wata beats her chest in victory. See, Oludumare, see what we have done. And to them he smiles, gathers his children as their spirits float home. This next poem is entitled The Mami Wata Brings the Spirits Home. What if the Mami Wata had overpowered those ships? Fins flying with a rapidity that defied the natural human eye as they toppled boats carrying sepia-skinned captives who would rather float face down in native waters than to be transported to a land inhabited by ghosts. I imagine the Mami Wata would have drawn them into the water, wrapped their bodies with seaweed, a watery, slimy winding sheet, but much preferred over growing old in a foreign land they would never call home. This next poem is called A Child's Soft Cries. I've been experimenting with different poetic forms in the writing of this collection, and I thought that I might try my hand with the form that was invented by the 2020 Pulitzer Prize winning poet Jericho Brown. That poetic form is called the duplex. And the duplex is comprised of 14 lines arranged in couplets, wherein each line is between 9 and 11 syllables. The second line of the first couplet is echoed in the first line of the second couplet, and so forth. And then the first line is repeated in the last. This poem is A Child Soft Cries. I looked for my mother in everyone's eyes, a scared, abandoned child whispering soft cries. Some adults leave when they hear a child's soft cries. She stole away like a memory washed clean. He stole away my best memories washed clean, left me seeing dark splotches, no happiness. Face filled with dark splotches showed no happiness. The other mother screamed her rabid hatred. Would a womb mother scream such rabid hatred? Gather none of my broken shards and pieces. She gathered no broken shards nor pieces. The wombless mother cried angry tears of loss. I felt such guilt for her angry tears of loss. I looked for my mother in everyone's eyes. The last of my poems is a ghazal called The Sound of My Voice. And a ghazal is made up of 5 or more couplets. And in the last couplet, it usually ends with some variation of the poet's name. The sound of my voice. Were I to call out to myself, would I hear the sound of my voice? Sadly, there is nothing to hear. It's dead to me, my voice. When I was young, I put limits on the words I spoke out loud. I understood even then that no one truly cared to hear my voice. I stifled my sobs by cramming my fist into my mouth. Most days, my eyes bulged with fear. They became my voice. He pushed against closed doors, forcing himself inside impenetrable walls. No matter how loud I cried, I could not seem to project my voice. I told her what he did, showed her the silver coin he left on the floor. She hit me across my face, said I was telling awful lies with my voice. I carry the scars on my back from the zigzag of her strap. I was a teen before I screamed the first time I heard my voice. He called me Angel, leaving off the A as if it were his choice. Every day I wished him dead, but alas, there was no power in my voice. The rest of that poetry collection really explores much of my childhood on into my teen years, but mercifully, as it gets towards the end of the collection, we do see a turn. So there is a happier ending coming. These next 2 selections come from 2 of my novels. The one I'm about to read from now is my most current novel called Homeward. The progression of being a writer of poetry to being a writer of prose is such a thin line that I seldom know for sure when I've transitioned from one literary form to the next. The beauty of writing is that each genre speaks so generously to the other, and the movement from poetry to prose and vice versa truly can be a smooth one. Homeward. No tears had come from me yet. I was still waiting on my miracle. I hadn't given up that God was going to give her back to me. He would realize he had punished me enough by taking Jasper, but as the minutes went by, as Aunt Shimmy gently cleaned me, I realized she wasn't coming back. Once Aunt Shimmy finished washing me, she changed the sheets, me still in the bed, and then she pulled them over, the clean sheets over me. Let me have her, I said. Mama placed her in my arms, then lay down with me and the baby on the other side of the bed. Ain't she pretty, Mama? I asked, never taking my eyes off my tiny angel. I wondered how much she weighed. Probably no more than 2 or 3 pounds, if that, I figured. She is beautiful, Mama said, putting her arm around my shoulders as we both gazed at the baby. Miss Shimmy, the doctor called out from the corner of the room. I'd forgotten he was still there. I didn't even pay attention to what Aunt Shimmy said or did. I just kept staring at my baby. After a few minutes, Aunt Shimmy came to the bed and put her hand on my arm. Rose, I'm going to walk the doctor out and tell everybody, well, I'm going to go tell him about the baby. I won't be long. Mama and she said something, but I was trying to memorize every part of my baby girl's features. I wanted to be able to call her up by memory, no matter how many weeks or months or years went by. There was a knock at the door, and Mama looked at me. I could tell she was worried. It was like my heart was so full of love for this baby, I would never hear her cry, that I was speechless. Do you want anybody to come in? Mama asked. I can tell them now's not a good time. No, they can come in, I said in a hoarse whisper. I want them to see her. Mama eased out of the bed and went to the door. Daddy, Grandma, Katie Bell, and Elena were standing there. I watched as they all drew close to the bed. Daddy had his good arm around Elena, who was crying. The room was quiet except for her sobs. I didn't want to hear my sister's sobs. Come here, Elena, I said, surprising myself with the strength of my voice. Daddy guided her over to the bed, and she got in beside me, laying her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was a little girl. Look at her, Elena. Ain't she the prettiest baby you ever seen? Yes, Elena said, lightly touching the baby's face and then mine. She's beautiful. Rose, she's so beautiful. I know. I stroked the baby's hair. It was so soft. I wanted to make sure I cut a little lock of it to keep after. Well, to keep. I wasn't ready to think about what was going to happen soon. I didn't want to think about them taking her from my arms forever. I pushed that thought away for now. I looked up at Daddy, Katie Bell, and Grandma. Grandma and Katie Bell were holding hands and wiping tears. Daddy sat down in the seat beside me. His eyes looked like he'd been crying too. He reached over and lightly touched the baby's head. Then he stroked my cheek. You okay, little girl? His voice was thick with emotion. I nodded. I didn't know why I wasn't crying. God knows I was hurt and angry, but it was like the tears wouldn't come. It was like something was keeping me from feeling the entire grief that a mother should be feeling in this moment, especially a mother who'd also just lost her husband, too. I'm okay, Daddy. Grandma, Katie Bell, y'all want to see her? Grandma inched closer and bent down and kissed the baby's head. I heard her whisper a prayer. See Katie Bell, I said. She's just as pretty as we thought she'd be. Yes, she is, Katie Bell said, and then she started to cry. Grandma put her arms around Katie Bell. Grandma was so strong, she always made sure she took care of everyone over herself. Y'all don't have to worry about me, I said firmly. I'm okay. She's going to be with Jasper. He'll take care of her. That's right, Grandma said. Jasper said from the start she was going to be a girl. Well, Jasper got his little girl, and he'll take care of her until we all see them again in the by and by. And don't forget about Grandpa Perkins. I'm sure he's already cuddling her and telling her she's the prettiest thing ever. That's when the tears started. One tear, then another, then several more. And before I knew it, I was making sounds I had never heard come out of me before. It was like they were coming from my soul. I couldn't stop myself, and my wails and sobs got louder and louder. Grandma came over, and Mama and Katie Bell, and they all put their hands on me and the baby. Nobody tried to tell me to stop. They just let me cry. It was too much for Daddy. He left out of the room sobbing himself, but my sisters, my grandmother, and my mama kept their hands on me, crying with me, like we were a chorus of weeping women. I heard the door open and I felt more hands. All the women in my family were there. It was like I was birthing a baby all over again, but this time the baby was grief, and they were my midwives. They weren't here to stop my pain. They were here to bear witness to it. I will conclude tonight by reading an excerpt from my upcoming novel, Untethered. The scene is set in 1967, and my protagonist, Kasha, is worried about her brother, who was recently sent home from Vietnam. Marcus, I called out to my brother, knocking softly on his door. There was no answer. It was hard to believe that it had only been a week since I'd gotten a call that they'd found him, and now he was home. We'd met him at the bus station 2 days ago, and even though he seemed happy to see us, he hadn't said much on the drive home or since. Mostly he stayed in the room he shared with his twin brother, Aaron, who was still missing in action. Neither Mama nor I asked him how much about Aaron. Marcus's state of mind seemed so fragile that we didn't want to upset him. I knew Mama had many questions, and I did too, but we agreed that we'd give him more time. Marcus seemed barely able to handle the most basic questions. Whenever I asked him how he was doing, he would look at me blankly, and then if I repeated the question, he would say in a monotone voice, "I'm okay." Yesterday, when I called Seth about starting the remodeling job at the group home, I mentioned that Marcus was unusually quiet. Give him time, Kat. Coming out of those jungles back to civilian life is difficult enough even under the best of circumstances. I can't imagine what your brother is going through after all that he has seen, knowing his twin is still there. Time will be the best healer. I thanked him, and after I hung up the phone, I felt a bit better. I was determined to give Marcus the time he needed. Meanwhile, Mama was determined to feed him back into good health. Thanksgiving was 3 days away, yet Mama had been cooking for Marcus almost relentlessly. Marcus's first night home, she made fried chicken, collard greens, potato salad, baked yams, and coconut cream pie. Marcus didn't eat one morsel. Instead, he sat at the table, tears rolling down his face as Mama held a fork full of food in front of his mouth like she used to when he was a toddler. We had tons of leftovers, but the next day, Mama fried fish and made coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, and sweet potato pie. This time, Marcus took a few bites, but he still ended the meal crying, loud, racking sobs that shook his frail body. Mama and I both held him tightly, but it was like a faucet of emotions had been turned on, and he didn't know how to turn them off. But Mama had a mission. Though her attempts at conversation with Marcus were failing, she seemed to think food was the key, so she kept cooking. I knocked at the door again. "Marcus, it's Sissy," I said. "Please answer me." I didn't want to barge in on him, but I was afraid for him to be alone. I had dealt with suicidal boys at the group home before. The thought of Marcus doing something to end his life nearly had me in a chokehold. Mama was in her room reading her Bible. I was glad that the words still brought her comfort. I couldn't manage dealing with them both melting down at the same time. "Yes," I finally heard Marcus reply. His voice sounded soft and weak, like a baby bird crying out from its nest. "Thank you," I whispered and opened the door. The room was dark and I could barely make out his shape on his bed. I went over and sat down, stroking his head the way I used to when he was a boy. I heard him mumbling, but I couldn't understand it. "What did you say, Bubby?" I used my old nickname for him. He just kept mumbling. I lay down in the bed and wrapped my arms around him. He was sweating in spite of the room's cool temperature. I leaned in closer, and then I heard what he was singing. "If I die in a combat zone, box me up and ship me home. Pin my medals upon my chest. Tell my mama I did my best. Mama, mama, don't you cry. Marine Corps motto is do or die." "Oh, baby," I said, the tears streaming down my face. I pulled my brother even closer, trying to ward away the crazy that was attacking his mind. "Sissy isn't going to let you go. Do you hear me? So I need you to fight. I need you to fight harder than you've ever fought before. Do you understand? Thank you."
Oh my goodness, Angela. Reading your work makes me cry, and I've been sitting here in tears since you started. And of course, Sarah, her work also is so lovely and so true. And both of you women are just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Before I forget, I want to mention to everyone that you can purchase Homeward from HarperCollins, and I'm assuming also on, I'd say probably bookstore perhaps would carry HarperCollins books. Yes. And Sarah, if you want to turn on your camera too, this is, and your mic, this is kind of the time of the evening that, that I give you all a question. And I also want to offer to our audience, if anybody in the audience has questions for Sarah or Angela, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will try to remember to look at that so that, but I'll get us started with a question. What I wanted to say though is I really appreciate that both of you took the time to tell us when you were using a form in your poetry and how to use the form. And then I was astounded that you had each used form, but you hadn't used the same form, which seemed like, wow, that's amazing that it turned out this night that we got to learn about so many different forms. And I appreciate both of you. Of course, you are both educators and very good at that as well. But I'm sure everyone who will listen and has listened is just really appreciative of learning maybe some new things about form, or being able to understand how the form works by hearing you read your poems and how lovely a form poem can be. And I've had several poets say that it helps them write their poetry to have the form as a sort of a scaffolding to go from. So anyway, I see you both nodding and I'm doing all the talking, and that's not my point. I didn't want to do that. So I've been asking the same question of all my guests this particular season, for the spring season. And everybody's done really good with it. I've had so many different answers though, and it'll be really wonderful to hear what the two of you happen to think when I say this. So I think what I'll do is I'll just put out the question, and whichever one of you would like to go first is fine with me. And I don't think this question is going to throw either of you at all, but I've just been asking everyone to tell me about your people. Tell me about your people.
Sarah, I felt like I just talked. I was going to give you a chance to talk first.
I was leaving space for you, Angela. And also it'll give me a moment to collect myself. I'm still a little from your reading. It's so beautiful.
Well, who are my people? Oh my goodness.
Tell me about your people.
Yeah, tell me about. I come from. I'm a proud descendant of enslaved individuals, of sharecroppers. Those are the stories that I know. But they are all storytellers. And so I say to people, my foray into creative writing started well before I ever entered into anyone's schoolhouse or university. I learned the art of storytelling from my uncles and from my dad and my aunts and cousins, people that didn't have a lot of book learning, but could keep a young girl like me just completely caught up in the stories that they would make up, or the stories that were real that they would share on a Saturday afternoon underneath pecan trees. And from them, I knew that I wanted to be a storyteller as well. And my people are also the people that I met and fell in love with in Kentucky. I had given up on writing because I was told that no one was interested in the types of stories that I wanted to tell because they weren't highfalutin enough. And then I had the good fortune to run into Silas House and Crystal Wilkinson and Frank X. Walker, and then to discover so many other Appalachian writers. And I wrote a poem about Appalachia being my first cousin, or being the first cousin to my work. And I really feel that way, that had I not had the ability to connect with those Kentucky writers and get to hear what a rural voice sounds like and reads like on the page, I don't know that I would have ever gone back to writing again. So a home for me and my people are all up in those hills and all in rural Alabama.
Nice. Yeah, I love that.
That's such a beautiful answer. And I'm still so struck, Angela, how you were discussing your character coming back from war. And when I think about my people, I think about the fact that I am a descendant from many veterans. My grandfather was a Korea and World War II veteran. That's how he was able to earn his college degree using the GI Bill. That's what started getting our family into into jobs sort of beyond laboring, which those are beautiful jobs too. But my grandfather, he always wanted more for himself and more for his family, and he wanted to be able to take care of his parents as they aged. And so my uncle was a veteran. My father was a veteran in the Navy. And so in a lot of ways, I think about how, I come from sort of the women of the family who tried their best to take care of men who were oftentimes broken by war. My father came back from Vietnam. He went in a 17-year-old, fresh-faced, good Catholic boy, and he came out just broken. And I think sometimes when we're broken by things, we don't recognize that our brokenness can break other people. And I think the women, we kind of banded together, and we really were a kind of a matriarchy within our, within a very sort of traditional sort of home. The women took care of each other. We told stories to each other. We tried to build, we tried to heal. And I think for me, interestingly, in probably diametrically opposed, perhaps from what Angela was talking about, our sort of role in the family was to preserve stories, but not necessarily to tell them. My family was very sort of secretive about, don't let people know about grandpa's drinking habit, or don't let anybody know that your father was addicted to drugs in Vietnam. Like there were these secrets that, that I think came out of that sense of perceived propriety or etiquette, or and I think for me, storytelling came really naturally. I was raised in the South, in the South, very adjacent to Southern Appalachia. And storytelling, the sort of the music that came out of that, country music and bluegrass music, it's all about telling stories. It's all about that emotional honesty, speaking and singing from, the mind and primarily the heart and the body. And so for me, I felt like I was an outlier to my people, much as I loved them. Speech pathologists, economists, K through 12 teachers. And here was this girl who was on scholarship to go to medical school, and and all I wanted to do was write poems, and all I wanted to do was teach. And so maybe a little bit like Angela, I found that as I transitioned into my creative writing workshops and sometimes met some classism, where I was this little, we didn't travel, we didn't have money. So, I was this, what I kind of think of like a little rural bumpkin, like in some of these, kind of bigger programs. And I didn't realize it because I hadn't been too far out of the South. And, and I felt like sometimes the poems I wrote were very much about, my people, where I came from. And that didn't always seem like it was something that was always valued, or it didn't reflect some of the things that we were reading. And so I also didn't necessarily feel like my voice was always appreciated in those circumstances. something that was really beautiful last summer, which is when I got to meet Angela for the first time, was being at Heinemann. I found it's so funny. Doug Van Gundy, who's a dear friend of mine, who's a wonderful Appalachian poet. He said over the span of 5 days, he said, Sarah, you stopped masking your accent. And he said, I did too. And suddenly we sound like where we grew up. And he said, what do you think made that happen? And I said, I think I'm comfortable. I think I'm finally comfortable around brilliant people who are daring to write with an open heart. And I was so lucky to get the job at Marshall because I would not have met that community without being here. And I love it so much. So my people, are oftentimes no longer with us. They're in heaven. So I don't know that I go back to Georgia much, but I do think that certain sense of homecoming that you get from being around writers who understand you, not just as a person, but sort of where you're coming from. Those are my people. Those are my people too.
I love that. I think a lot of folks confronted with this question feel the same way. You have your people that you are born of and that you were raised with, but then you've sort of accumulated and gathered in all these other people that are now your people because they accept you for who you are, and like you, Sarah, I loved you talking about masking your twang because I tried for years to mask my twang. And depending on who I'm around, I twang more than others sometimes. I twang more than other times. But it was exhausting. I'm sure you would agree that when I masked my twang, then I had to talk really slow to do it. And it was exhausting. And I just stopped doing that because it just was too hard. And it wasn't me. And I think I hear you saying that too, Sarah. And I think the three of us have in common Heinemann because it's a life-changing place. And I finally realized it just kind of word of mouth and stumbled in there. Oh, I'm Appalachian. Oh, now it all makes sense, And like both of you were saying, you realize that people do want to hear these stories. They really do. And those that don't have no soul. They just don't. They want to hear about rainbows and mud puddles because that's all they can handle. And that's okay too. I don't mean to shame anybody, but so thank you both for your wonderful, beautiful honesty concerning your people. I just love that. So the audience has not given us any questions tonight. Sometimes, oh, wait. Someone does say, ladies, I'm so moved by the intensity of love and pain and the authentic beauty of your words springing to life off the pages. It is such a blessing to hear authors give voice to their people. And for Angela, I have been torn up grieving with Rose in Homeward, and now the new book, wanting to know if his sister will for him, if his sister's will for him to not just survive but return to the sanity is going to be enough to save Marcus. So this person wants to know when Untethered will be released. They are longing for that information.
Oh, thank you so much. And Charlotte, you're just an amazing person. We were students at Spalding together. Everybody's connected, I said. If you're a writer in this area of the world, we're all connected in some way or another. Untethered is scheduled to be released on December 3rd of this year. So yeah, I'm very excited about that new book baby coming out into the public and seeing how it's received. But similar to Sarah, I had a lot of mainly men in my family who struggled after various wars. And so anytime I can write about them and give voice to their stories that often don't get heard, I try to.
Yes, I agree. There's poems about my father and my son's service in all of my collections. It's not something that you can put away. And when the muse says, you will write about this, you write. And then you realize it fits in the collection and is part of it. So somebody else is saying, I'm grateful for the words of pain that you expressed. How did you begin to allow yourself to share these most intimate emotions that many don't want to hear? And this question is obviously for both of you. So Sarah, did you want to go first? I think we're all getting very emotional tonight. This is, I actually knew this was going to happen with both of you because you do write so deeply from the heart and have such deep knowledge of this pain. So,
I think
how did you
way-
begin to allow yourself to share these most intimate emotions that many don't want to hear? And I disagree with that. I think they do want to hear it. They just can't handle it very well at first.
I think, growing up in the programs that I grew up in, and let me just say, I had wonderful mentors who, taught me about poetry, that taught me how to read, taught me how to use these critical thinking skills. But everything was here, right? We entered the work from our heads, and we were, thinking about it and taking it apart and looking at all of the great things. And I was reading all of these people who, had trust, I'm thinking about Elizabeth Bishop with her trust fund hanging out in Brazil, and that was not my reality. We lived in a little duplex, in the kind of rough side of Athens until Mama finally got what we called a starter home. And that was ours. That was our house. And so I think for me, it got to the point where I felt like if I wrote these very intellectual poems or very kind of clever poems, I wasn't being emotionally honest. The work wasn't ringing true. I don't think it was ringing true, among the people that were, in my workshop. I don't think we talk about imposter syndrome. I think those poems were all full of imposter syndrome because I didn't want people to see, the little girl who lost, her dad when she was 2 years old, and, the mother who was frequently depressed and working 2 minimum wage jobs. Like, I didn't, I went to these schools where people had money and people had like, a lot of support at home. And, I had love, but Mama couldn't give me anything. I mean, if I was going to go to school, I had to go to school on scholarship. So, I mean, I think for me, my life was touched by tragedy. My father did die in the line of duty. He was a drug addict. He was a womanizer. My mother, struggled a lot after he passed away. My grandfather dealt with his wartime terrors by being a functional alcoholic. We didn't talk about it. We just knew he drank, and then he got angry, and then he'd go pass out, and that was just normal. And I mean, and I think that for me, if I was going to be a writer, I knew I was going to have to do what Dorothy Allison said you're going to have to do, which is to write the things that scare you, because those are the things that are honest. And I think so many of us who come from lack, who come from poverty, who come from rural situations, we hold on to a whole lot of shame for a good long time until we realize, who we are, that makes our writing what it is. And for me, being a writer, I am drawn into stories. Tell me a story, give me, give me that, that intensity. And I don't care what it's about. You'll hook me, and I won't quit reading it till I'm done. And I realized that when I would hyper intellectualize these poems and I would take myself out of them, they were hollow. So if I was going to be a writer, I had to write who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I so agree. I had both a good childhood on one level. My dad was an amazing man, but he also was sort of blinded by his duty to a wife over his duty to his daughter. So a lot of the abuse that I experienced by her hand, he did not step in and stop it. And I've had to learn how to forgive him for, his just not saying and not stopping the things things that he could have stopped, not protecting me when he could have. And writing poetry was my first. I say I didn't have the wherewithal in my late teens and early 20s to go see a psychiatrist or a therapist. Probably would have helped me out a lot if I would have, but that just wasn't something that you did in my community. You took it to God, and that was it. That was how you fixed it. And I was, I didn't understand why that wasn't fixing it for me. So I wrote poetry really as a way to heal myself. And at first, so many of these poems were so personal and so raw, not the ones that I shared tonight, but my original poems, that I thought, I don't even know what I would do with this. I think these should just stay tucked away. And finally, a friend of mine read them and said, these poems can help heal a little girl like you. You need to share your poetry with other people. So I didn't even send out a poem until I was in my late 30s, early 40s, because again, I just thought it was for my own healing. I didn't think about it in terms that someone else might read them and see themselves, or see, a story of a woman who dealt with abuse, who dealt with mental illness, or who dealt with whatever I dealt with and made it on the other side of it. And that's how I've always approached writing. I think someone asked about, how do we go into this pain and write about these things? Because I think we wear multiple hats. And somehow when I'm sitting down writing, I'm able to separate myself from some of the pain that I'm putting on the page. Now, when I reread it, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I can't believe you put this out there like that. But in the writing, it really is almost like something takes over me, and the words just come, and it doesn't eat at me and gnaw at me the way it did when it was happening. So I think maybe time and distance is part of it, but also, just recognizing the need that someone used to say is better out than in, or it does you better to get it out than to leave it in. So once I've written it and once I put it out there, it's as if a little portion of that little girl is healed. And the more I can do to heal her before I leave this planet, the better off I'll be, I think.
I don't think I
Beautiful.
would have survived my mama's death without reading a whole bunch of grief literature and then starting to write these poems about my mom, about my experience. And I never thought I was going to show those to the world. And then I realized that I was being kind of a hypocrite. Like, how in the world am I gonna turn to all of these books that saved me, like Cheryl Strayed's Wild and Mark Doty's Heaven's Coast? Like, if I'm writing stuff about my experience, that could help somebody. And that's called paying it forward.
That is so true. And as Appalachians, that's part of our creed, to pay it forward. It really is. Both of you women have been absolutely extraordinary. What an evening we've had. I do want to remind folks that you can get Burn at Southern Illinois University Press, and you can get Homeward at HarperCollinsFocus.com. So I want to make sure they have that web address in case they have any trouble finding that. And your new book will be out soon in December. So that's so wonderful. And Sarah, I have no doubt you have another book in process at this time. So I'm sure we'll hear about that soon.
Do you mind if we answer Thomas's question real quick?
Oh, did we get another question that I
Yes,
didn't?
we did.
I am so sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead and share the question.
Well, I think it's a great question. Thomas says, at what point does your work become an heirloom? And how do your narratives, both in poetry and prose, become stories for those who will follow you? I think that's a beautiful question. One thing that I almost always do whenever I do a reading or whenever I'm at an event, I always bring up my dad. Flaws and all, MC Jackson is the reason why I'm a writer, because he poured into me. And so for me, writing is also about anytime I can acknowledge that man who had a 10th grade education and who never saw for himself anything beyond maybe being a janitor at a university, let alone the idea of his daughter teaching at one. I like to evoke the name of him and of the other ancestors. So I think for me, my writing is less about the legacy I'm leaving for myself. And I know that, I hope that's a part of it, but it's more so a legacy for those ancestors, both spoken by me and unspoken, who now have an opportunity to be talked about in places that they never would have been talked about, that the only access to those places would have been maybe as a cleanup person. But now people will be talking about them. And that for me is the legacy that I see in my writing, is that I'm honoring those folks whose voices did not get to be heard.
Sarah, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I remember when I was going through my early stages of grief with my mom. I was an only child. As y'all know, my daddy died when I was a little girl, a tiny little thing. So it was me and my mom. And so when she passed in my early 30s, I mean, I was really just shattered. And, so I relied on the wisdom that, the people would tell me. And there were two things I hold with me, which is that you never get over the loss. You just get strong enough to carry those people with you wherever you go. And the second piece of advice that I got was people die two times. Once when they take their last breath, and then the second time is when someone utters their name for the last time. And I was like, no way. There is a little hole in my heart that will carry 160-pound, 5'6" woman that was my mother. And I will carry her everywhere. I will do what I have to do that. And I will continue to write my people into my books. Even if they, their stories are not beautiful or eloquent, or, they struggled, because, to me, they were beautiful. I remember my mom went back to grad school when I was in my late teens. That woman would wake up at 3 a.m. to do her homework, and she'd work 2 jobs. And she made a good GP. I think she made 1B. And I think that's how I ended up going through a graduate program and being the only person in my family to get a PhD, because I was like, well, if my mom can do it, I sure can do it. And so the strength that I have came from her tenacity. So I'm going to tell her story.
As we should. And like I said, people really do want to hear it. That whole hoopla of nobody wants to hear this story is almost like the guy that hangs out at the water cooler and talks about how cool he is when we know he's not cool. Hey, folks, we're here. We're gonna share our stories and hold our beer. Hold our beer while we do it, because we're here and we're not leaving. And yes, and Thomas, thank you for that question. I'm so glad you saw that, Angela. I totally missed that, so I apologize. And it was a great question. Anything else the two of you have for each other or anything like that? We've done the long Appalachian goodbye. This has been wonderful. I love that, that we've lingered, and I love that so much. And I thank you both for taking the time to do that. I shared with Angela and Sarah earlier, I was getting emails from people saying, why don't you ever share a poem when you do these events? So I have come to share one little poem at the end. And so I do have one tonight from my own book, Dirt Songs, which is from Eastover Press, just a marvelous, marvelous press located in Massachusetts. But the folks who run the press come from all over, including the poetry editor, who's Denton Loving. From the middle of Tennessee, and just such a wonderful man. And so I think this poem has turned out to be very appropriate. And so this is, she would have crawled through hell on her belly over glass, which is why I cannot tend the garden without a tingle of nostalgia, or bear the honeysuckle's unction, those tender tendrils. I swear she exuded hints of that nectar even during winter's wearisome months. So connected was she to the land and its ways. Her eyes brimmed in echoes of foothills and sky. I would come to her broken. She would cackle like a banty hen, slap a thigh, dance a weebly whirl. Every care I thought to claim became nameless. When the past presses in, I kneel as she taught me, her trowel in my hand. Attend the taters and peas, the strawberries plump beginning to blush. There's a mare in the barn hungry for apples. The bluebirds' box tidy and new nested. Tree frogs eep and bleatle along the creek. The glow of her presence so vivid, I have to squint my eyes.
Mm.
Thank you all so very much for coming out this evening, and thanks to all who will watch at a later date. I want to thank the Dairy Barn Arts Center and Ohio Arts Council. We would not be here without them. Please buy our guests' books. If you've lost track of what I've told you, if you go to my website, CarrieGunterSeymourPoet.com, and click on Spoken and Heard, all of the books are listed there and where to get them. And very quickly, I'd like to ask you all to join me next season to hear all of these extraordinary voices. In September, Kathy Fagan and Kay Coggin. Kay is famous for her women's poetry group. We're going to have Joy Priest and Mary B. Moore from our Appalachian poets. And in November, we'll have Ellen Bass, who needs no introduction, and the wonderful Dustin Brookshire, who has become beloved to all of us thanks to social media and his marvelous personality. So I'm just going to say goodnight and say, until we meet again, friends, be safe. Good night now.